Hi, I'm sorry I can't be there with you live, but it'll be about 2 o'clock in the morning by the time that you see this. So I'm Danny from the University of Sydney. I'm here to talk to you about the university's two-lane approach to assessment, where we balance integrity with relevance. Just to set the scene with a couple of videos, this very first video is a very recent thing from OpenAI, which is called AI Operator. And this particular operator AI agent is able to basically navigate a browser by itself and look around and do things. And so what you see here in this video is the AI operator basically having a browser controlling what's happening to the mouse and the keyboard, looking around the screen, answering questions on a VLE, submitting the quiz, realizing it's missed a question, and then going back to complete the question perfectly fine, and it's getting 4 out of 4. So this is a completely autonomous AI agent completing something on the VLE. This video is trying to show what is possible now, even with live online assessments. So in this particular video, I am pretending to be a student, and my colleague is pretending to be my examiner. And he's asking me something about rhetoric, which is actually a topic I have no idea about. So I'm going to play this video for you, and we're going to see what happens.
Excellent. And a major challenge we've spoken about in the course is how you adapt communication for multicultural audiences. Have you considered this at all? And do you have any research sources that might support you in this understanding?
Yeah, so it's really important in this kind of context to adapt to multicultural audiences. It involves understanding their cultural differences and how they communicate, maybe their styles, values, and also expectations. I think it's important to be culturally sensitive and aware of these non-verbal cues, which is really important when you do communication. So things like language nuances and context and those kind of things. I've looked into sources like Hofstadter, cultural dimensions theory, and also Hall's work on high context and low context cultures. And these provide valuable insights into these differences. So let's see what Ben thought about my performance.
Wow, that was that was really impressive. Yeah, I can't believe it. It's those answers are at a standard that we would get in first year writing, definitely. And then when you brought in the research, I was thinking that's sort of equivalent to second year.
So in this situation, what's happening is I've got a couple of AIs running. The AI on the left is transcribing the conversation between Ben and I, and the AI on the right is actually using a different AI to tell me what to say in response to the interview. What really scares me is seeing a potential headline like this into the future. Bridge collapse, engineer got away with using AI for all major uni assignments. And imagine what the article might say. This has been obviously digitally altered, so this never happened, but I fear that it may happen if we don't take this seriously. This article might say something like, 6 people are presumed dead. The investigation revealed that the chief engineer was basically told in their class, don't use AI for anything except for editing. Okay, so the academic in charge said to their students, you can only use AI for editing and not for anything else. The reality of the situation is that even if we tell students these things, they're not going to necessarily follow it. And so we need some way to be sure of what students are doing and what they know. And so this all comes down to assuring the value of our award program, simultaneously integrity value in terms of, do we know that the person walking across a graduation stage has the necessary knowledge, skills, and dispositions, as well as the relevance value in terms of, are we helping our students learn contemporary approaches, including AI, that they need for the future. Integrity and relevance need to sit side by side. Otherwise, we are doing our students a disservice and also the community a disservice. Now, how do we do this? How do we assure integrity and relevance side by side? At Sydney University, we've come up with this idea of a 2-lane approach to assessment. We started working with this about July 2023. And the idea behind the 2-lane approach is that you have many assessments in lane 2. And lane 2 are assessments that act to motivate and encourage students to learn. Okay, they're open or unsecured assessments where AI use is scaffolded and supported as it's relevant. Here, it's not possible to restrict or ban or detect AI, but rather the role of lane 2 is for us to help students engage with AI in a productive and a responsible way. The point of a lane 2 assessment is still to learn the disciplinary skills and knowledge and disposition, but with the support of AI. Now, you can't just have lane 2 because otherwise we'll never know if it's the student or the AI doing the work. Hopefully it's the student, but we never know. And so you need to also have lane 1 assessments to ensure that integrity value. Lane 1 is where you have assessment of learning, and these have to be secured and they have to really be in person. In this situation, you can actually control or restrict whether or not AI is used or not because it's the student in front of you. Lane 1 assessments do not just have to be exams. They can be other forms of really authentic assessments, such as interactive oral assessments. Now, a Lane 1 assessment may or may not involve AI use. I'll give you an example. Marketing these days. You'll be hard-pressed to find a marketing executive who will hire a graduate who does not know how to use AI. And so you can imagine a marketing Lane 1 assessment might be an interactive oral, which is where the student pretends to be a marketing person, the examiner is a client, and they have a computer there with maybe Midjourney or some other AI there. And the examiner will talk the student through a particular scenario, acting as the client and saying, oh, I need this idea for a brand campaign that I have. Can you help me think through it? And through that interactive oral Lane 1 secured assessment, the student can demonstrate their skills that they picked up as part of their marketing module. The whole point of what we're trying to do with students at a higher education level is we're trying to develop in them these contemporary capabilities which are going to be relevant for their future. We take a step sideways and think about this question here. Which app would you use to create a balance sheet for an annual report? When we show students these apps and how to use it, we know students have access to all of these applications and we can't stop or restrict or deny them access. So do we go around then saying, well, Excel's a green light assignment, whereas PowerPoint's a red light and Word is an orange light? We don't do this because we know that there's no way to stop or restrict the use of these technologies. So instead, what we do is we show students the responsible and productive ways to use particular kinds of technologies. And we say to them, well, Excel is good because, it's more suitable for this particular task. It's more helpful. Now, this brings in the question, what is happening around traffic lights and AI assessment scales that we're seeing around the sector? There's a few problems with these traffic light systems and assessment scale systems. One of the problems is that there is actually no way to restrict this, okay? If you're saying to a student, this is a level 2 orange assignment, you're only allowed to use AI for editing or improving clarity. The problem is, how do you know? They could be using AI for drafting text and we would be none the wiser because there's no way to detect AI written text. We can't restrict and we can't know. Really, we can't enforce the restrictions that we are putting in place. And if you can't enforce a restriction, this actually harms the validity of your assessment. You're no longer measuring what you think you're measuring. The other problem with these lights and scales is that they imply that there's a linear gradation of AI use for a particular assessment. And that's just not the case. Because the real way that AI is used in society, in work, in study, is much more complex and much more dynamic. A menu analogy works a bit better because when you go to a restaurant, you have an entire menu available to you. Depending on how you feel, you could pick certain things from the menu and you might leave certain things off. In a similar way, for assignment 1, maybe these would be the most healthy menu items that would actually help students learn alongside AI. And for assignment 2, maybe these are the more healthy menu items. Our role as an educator is to help students navigate this complex menu of AI capabilities and help them to understand how they could use AI in more helpful ways as part of assessment. Not to restrict them, not to traffic light them, not to assessment scale them, but rather to identify and help them understand how to use AI well. We've got a website that we released recently. The URL's on the top right of the screen, and this website tries to demonstrate and implement some of the ideas that we've heard so far. So for example, we have some examples of rules and guardrails, some examples of explaining what AI does. We've got examples of AI and how it can be used in teaching and how to talk to students about this, as well as examples of how the assessment structure that we've talked about so far can find its way into real classrooms and real curriculum. So just a final example of a two-lane approach. This is a program that I teach into. It's called the Graduate Certificate in Educational Studies. It has 4 modules. And as part of these 4 modules, what we did last year is we actually turned almost all of the assessments in these 4 modules over to a Lane 2 assessment. And this means that students could use any AI they wanted to, but we showed them in class how to use particular AIs that would actually be useful for their learning as opposed to circumvent their learning. So we showed them the menu, we scaffolded the use of AI, and we asked them to reflect upon and acknowledge how they use AI. We also put in place these lane 1 hurdle assessments at key points in the program. And these assessments were interactive orals where we would sit with a student for 15, 20 minutes, and we would talk them through a scenario with a bunch of questions and a rubric to guide us as well. And what these lane 1 assessments allowed us to do is it allows us to securely measure, do assessment of learning of those program learning outcomes. Okay, so a student who went through EDPR 5001 on the left, they could have used AI to do all their work for them and not learn a thing, which means when they come to EDPR 5002, they would fail that lane 1 hurdle and we would see them again next year. If a student went through EDPR 5001, they used AI, but they also learned something, then they will pass that lane 1 hurdle in EDPR 5002 and they'll be perfectly fine. They've learned, they've used AI, everyone wins. So there are some important big questions the AI poses for us as higher education. And one of them is, how far forward are we looking? Which horizon are we preparing for? Everything in the middle of this chart happened over the past 2 years since November 2022. And it's really been quite amazing how fast the technology has improved. And who knows how fast it will be until, or how soon it will be until we get to a place where we may have something called artificial general intelligence or super intelligence. This is where you have AI which can basically do everything that a human could do or possibly better. Are we, as higher education, preparing for this potential eventuality? We need to look far enough ahead and have our policies and our approaches to be forward-looking enough so that we don't get caught unaware. And how do we do this? In higher education, we're very good at hoarding. We're very good at hoarding content on our curriculum. Slide number 125 of our lectures needs to contain, this little morsel of information because maybe students will find that helpful down the track. But Marie Kondo, who is an expert in decluttering, says two things, or says many things, but these are two quotes that I quite like from her. She says, if we look into the reasons why we can't let something go, it's either because we are attached to the past or we fear the future. This is really telling for what we do as educators and how we feel about this future with AI in it. And Marie also says, to truly cherish the things that are important to you, you must first discard those that have outlived their purpose. What do we truly cherish in higher education? What I mean by this is the essay, don't throw away the essay. Okay, I don't think the essay has outlived its purpose because the essay, as an example, really encourages students to do deep, long-form thinking, and that's really important. But the essay has lost its ability to be a lane 1 secured assessment because AI can do a lot of things that we once thought that were only possible by humans. And so we need to think about, well, why are we having our students do essays? What is the value in doing the essay? And of course there is value, but then to think about that truly and to think about, well, how do we evaluate that in a lane 1 secured context? And also how do we develop that in a lane 2 open context as well? So Phil's asked me to think about a couple of questions that we often get asked around the 2 approach. One question is, why should we bother having lane 2 at all? Shouldn't every assessment just be lane 1 secured? And the answer to this is, securing assessments is going to get harder and harder. It's going to be more expensive, more time consuming, and more workload intensive as well. And so we want to try and avoid having lane 1s everywhere. Instead, we want to try and have lane 1 secure assessments at key points in the program where security is particularly important. Another question we often get asked is, how much should a lane 1 assessment be worth versus a lane 2 assessment? At Sydney University, we have the concept of a hurdle assessment, which is a must-pass assessment. And so we can let our lane 1 hurdle assessments be worth maybe 30, 40%. And so it's not too stressful and strenuous for the students, and still be able to say, well, if the student fails the lane 1, even if they've passed all their lane 2s and gotten decent marks and could pass the unit overall, they still fail the module because they have not passed the lane 1 secure barrier or threshold assessment. So thanks for your time today. Sorry I couldn't be with you again. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.